It has just gone 8 o'clock Central African Time. Good evening and welcome to the news bulletin at 8, brought to you by Eswatini TV. My name is Sunny Boy Ngwane. Thank you so much for staying with us. We are coming to you live from our Hospital Hill studios in Babane. These are our top stories tonight. The Ministry of Health is engaging different companies to increase their oxygen supply to Eswatini. Over 70 students from Eswatini have left the kingdom for Botswana in a flight chartered by government. And the Eswatini Electricity Company has put in place an emergency preparedness plan for places that might be affected by strong winds in the upcoming weekend. And now the news in detail. On behalf of His Majesty King Mswati III, Her Majesty the Queen Mother, government and the people of Eswatini, the acting Prime Minister Themba Masuku has expressed grief and condolences to the President of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, family, relatives, as well as friends and the people of South Africa on the passing away of that country's minister in the presidency, Jackson Mthembu. Mthembu passed away on Thursday due to COVID-19 related complications. The acting Prime Minister says it is the hope and prayer of the people of Eswatini that the Lord Almighty will comfort the next of kin, friends and government during this dark hour of loss. And now coming back home, the Ministry of Home Affairs reminds members of the public that the ministry's offices as well as its regional services centers will be opened throughout the weekend to provide assistance to members of the public who wish to make death certificates for their loved ones who have passed away. The ministry will also continue to issue out permits for those who wish to bury their loved ones after a 3-day mandatory burying period. The announcement was made by the ministry's communications officer, Mlando Dlamini. The Minister of Health, Lizinkosi, says the ministry has already engaged different companies to increase the supply of oxygen in the country's hospitals because oxygen is now in high demand due to the number of COVID-19 patients in need of it. We have a report.
Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, some people who are being treated for the disease later develop complications and scarcity in breathing, which then requires assistance with oxygen. Currently, the oxygen is in demand in the country has run short of oxygen. The Minister of Health, Lizinkosi, says they've engaged several companies to increase the supply of oxygen in the country.
Lokuthi sebaningi kakhulu abantu labese bagula kakhulu uqala abantu bebasheshe baqhamuke basheshe belapheke nyalo sebaningi kakhulu abantu labeta sebagula.
She says all along companies were supplying the country at least once a week, but now they have since increased the supply. They now supply almost daily due to the increasing number of patients and the need and demand for the oxygen. She says not only COVID-19 patients, but everyone who happen to run short of breath can be assisted and also supply all hospitals with the oxygen and satisfy its need countrywide. I am Kian Msibi for Eswatini TV News, Babane.
A delegation of cabinet ministers today inspected the home of the late Minister for Public Service, who was also the Member of Parliament of the Cyclone 1 constituency, Christian Ntshangase, to check its readiness for the minister's funeral tomorrow. The delegation was led by the Minister of Natural Resources and Energy, Peter Bembe, who said the main purpose of the visit was to make sure that all COVID-19 safety measures are complied with. We have a report.
The state funeral for the late minister, who was also the Member of Parliament of the Cyclone 1 constituency, Christian Ntshangase, who passed on last week from COVID-19, will be laid to rest on Saturday the 23rd of January at Mkwakweni, his home area in the Cyclone region. We spoke to the Minister for Natural Resources and Energy, Peter Bembe, who was leading the delegation that was entrusted by the cabinet to ascertain that all preparations are in line with COVID-19 safety protocol. Bembe says preparations for the late minister's funeral are at an advanced stage.
As a team that was selected by cabinet to make arrangements for the funeral of the late Christian Ntshangase, Minister of the Crown. We are here at his home area to finalize preparations for his burial tomorrow. We have been making arrangements. We are together with the police and we are together with the Njangase family, and we are finalizing the final stages. Everything seems to be in order. We are trying to avoid the recurrence of the disease or the virus taking charge of people. So we are trying as much as possible to say, if you can, please stay at home and watch the proceedings via your computers and your cell phones.
The state funeral for the late Minister Christian Njangase will start at 9 a.m. on Saturday and will be broadcast on all social media platforms including YouTube. Reporting for Eswatini TV News, I am Sifiso Ngumalo with Smuva Shongwe, Mkwakweni.
The government of Eswatini, in collaboration with the Royal Eswatini National Airways Corporation, has chartered a flight for 70 students from the Eswatini to safely return to different tertiary institutions in Botswana. The students departed from the King Mswati III International Airport this afternoon. And our reporter Tembelihle Makuchwa filed this report for us.
On Friday afternoon, the 70 students who are enrolled in different tertiary institutions in Botswana left the Kingdom of Eswatini for Botswana using a chartered flight. Royal Eswatini National Airways Corporation, RENAC, Marketing and Communications Officer Batabile Nkambule says they consider the chartered flight as one of the safe ways to travel for the students, whose flight will go straight to Botswana, as all 70 passengers on board will not face the inconveniences of changing to connecting flights.
It's worth mentioning that as Royal Eswatini National Airways, in cooperation with the airports authorities and the airline, we have ensured that all safety precautions relating to COVID-19 are met during the logistics. As we speak, we are awaiting results from the number of students that are flying out. Because we have to ensure they have their certificates tested negative for COVID, and upon arrival in Botswana they'll be required to retest again.
Nkambule continued to say they take the students' safety very seriously, as they will be tested upon arrival at Botswana Airlines. Reporting for Eswatini TV News is Tembelihle Makuchwa with Themba Shabangu at Skope.
The Eswatini Electricity Company has put in place an emergency preparedness plan for places that might be affected by the weekend's anticipated strong winds. Now, EEC's Marketing and Corporate Communications Manager Kaya Mavuso says the plan will focus on security points, communication centers and health centers, amongst others.
According to the Eswatini Meteorological Services Thursday report, the Kingdom of Eswatini will no longer be hit by Cyclone Eloise as it was anticipated, but strong winds can be expected over the weekend till Monday next week. During natural disasters, countries usually experience structural damages, including power outages. The Eswatini Electricity Company's Marketing and Corporate Communications Manager Kama Vuso says they have in place an emergency preparedness plan for places that might have damages, more especially security points, health centers and community centers, to mention a few.
EC has an emergency preparedness plan that is existing. This is the plan that we are going to use to mitigate the effects of the cyclone that we are anticipating over the weekend and beginning of next week. Our company has actually recalled all employees that are on leave to be on standby in the event there is a need to address issues that will come from this cyclone. The first point that we are concerned about is our national security key points. Those are the areas that will first make sure that they do have electricity, and more especially during this COVID era, we are focusing on our healthcare facilities to ensure that they do have electricity. We do not know the intensity of the cyclone, but we will do our best to make sure that customers are assisted where possible. We do appeal to customers to avoid contacting fallen electricity wires, but report them to EEC through our toll-free numbers. You can also report them to the nearest police station or the emergency police number.
Mavuso further pleaded for patience from Emaswadi, as some of the company's staff members are currently at home due to COVID-19, and there might be delays in some services offered by the company. He also encouraged EEC's customers to use remote services and avoid visiting the company's offices to curb the spread of COVID-19. Reporting for Eswatini TV News, I am Samgil Soyokoza with Gianim Sibi Babane.
The country's three church bodies, the Conference, Council and League of Churches, have registered their interest to sit down and engage with government on ways of relaxing rules of the partial lockdown to help churches operate in a manner that will not compromise COVID-19 prevention protocols. Representatives of the three church bodies announced their intentions of engaging government in a joint press briefing that was held today in Mbabane.
In the joint press briefing held at the Thokoza Church Center in Mbabane, the country's three church bodies, which were represented by Themba Ngozo, who is CEO of the Conference of Churches, Bishop Sipho Tembe of the League of Churches, and Bishop Begindlela Magongo, who is chairperson of the Council of Eswatini Churches, expressed their condolences to all people who have lost loved ones to COVID-19. In a statement read by Bishop Magongo, the three church bodies further praised His Majesty King Mswati III for his wisdom, government, and all healthcare workers for dedicating their lives to providing healthcare to the people of Eswatini, even in these trying times. The three church bodies also expressed concern that other sectors of Eswatini's economy are currently operating as usual, whilst the church remains completely shut. Bishop Magongo says the church body in Eswatini is open to engaging with government on the relaxation of the rules of the partial lockdown.
We encourage government to engage the three church bodies with a view of collectively find ways to review the decision so that possibilities of relaxing without putting lives at risk can be explored. The nation now lives in perpetual fear, and the church can play a pivotal role in inspiring a sense of hope and optimism that this fierce battle will be won.
Bishop Magongo encourages the people of Eswatini to hold on to God despite these tough times.
Let us turn to Him in prayer and allow these sad times to draw us closer to Him and believe in Him with childlike faith.
The three church bodies further encourage Christians and all people in the country to firmly abide by the rules of the partial lockdown. For Eswatini TV News, Hlengiwe Ndlovu with Muzim Konda in Mbabane.
Now, Eswatini Tourism Authority's head of marketing, Sboniso Madlopa, says even though government has implemented stricter COVID-19 regulations, yet tourism attraction sites and leisure facilities remain open for all people. And our reporter, Kian MCB, has more on that story.
The Ministry of Tourism was one of the ministries that was hard hit by the effects of COVID-19 last year because border gates and airports were closed, resulting in no visits from tourists. The Ministry of Tourism then promoted the domestic tourism campaign, encouraging Maswati to visit local tourist attraction places, which they did. Now that His Majesty's government has once again effected the lockdown with stricter regulations this time, what does this mean for the industry? The Eswatini Tourism Authority head of marketing, Sboniso Madlopa, says the tourism industry is still open for a Maswati, and the Maswati can visit the different tourism attraction places, but they must adhere to all COVID regulations.
And as such, we are encouraging everyone that is going to be visiting any tourism establishments to adhere to all the regulations that have been put in place. But first and foremost, we want to encourage Maswati to really comply with what the acting Prime Minister has put in place or has announced in terms of the lockdown and the restrictions that have been put in place. And we're saying all those who will be doing business must do it in the contents of these restrictions. So if it so happened as the business in the tourism sector is still open, if it so happened that you go to these tourism facilities, make sure that you adhere to all the regulations that have been put in place, that you ensure that you have your mask on, you always sanitize, and you keep your social distance. And the acting Prime Minister has banned gathering. So when you go there, you are not supposed to be in clusters. So that is what we are emphasizing to Maswati as they visit this tourism establishment.
Madlopa says people are stressed nowadays as a result of COVID-19. Some do need fresh air and time out, therefore they can visit locally. For Eswatini TV News, I'm Kian Msibi in Babane. Some visuals from the internet.
Cyclone Eloise will no longer hit Eswatini this weekend as it was initially feared. Now, the Eswatini Meteorological Services Department instead warns the nation of strong winds which could be experienced in the kingdom, which could come as a result of the cyclone's landfall in neighboring countries. We have a report.
The tropical cyclone is approaching Beira and moving along quite close to the coast of Mozambique. We're still expecting it to do landfall around Beira tomorrow morning. After which it will continue moving in Mozambique and eventually into Zimbabwe and Botswana. This is to say the actual center of the storm will no longer be coming to our kingdom. However, we are still expecting some weather that will be influenced by the presence of the tropical cyclone in the region. In this regard, we have a frontal system that is approaching from the west, moving eastwards. That as it has the tropical storm to the north of it, it will then have some weather that will come into the country as a result of having the two systems within the vicinity of each other. What we expect as a result of that is to have some winds which will be on the strong side, particularly Sunday, later Sunday and into Monday morning. These winds, they will be in varying speeds across the country, but there are various parts of the country where we expect the winds to be in excess of 50 kilometers per hour, especially the highlands and also our areas to the east of the country. However, we will request all Eswatini, irrespective of location, to take precaution that should the wind get to their place, as the topography of our country results in microclimates, to prepare for the wind.
The Bapalali Eswatini Red Cross Society has activated response teams across all the country's regions in preparation for the strong winds which are likely to hit Eswatini from the upcoming weekend. Red Cross volunteers are on standby, despite meteorologists having given an update that the cyclone is unlikely to directly affect Eswatini.
While the Eswatini Meteorological Services has assured the nation that tropical cyclone Eloise will not strike Eswatini in the manner that it was initially feared the cyclone would, but now strong winds will be experienced in the country from the weekend. Yet still, Secretary General of Bapalali Swaziland Red Cross Society, Denja Nhlabati, says their organization, working together with other stakeholders in government, is already prepared for any eventuality.
We have already assembled 5 teams so that we are getting ready for the cyclone. Each team is comprised of 10 trained personnel on disaster response. So we are very happy that we also have backup teams from volunteers. Apart from the 5 teams, we also have some volunteers who are also on standby, so that when the situation becomes severe, we can call them to come and respond. I must say that we are also trying our best to organize response material. With regards to the response material, we don't have enough tents. I'm referring to the family-sized tents. We don't have enough. The few that we have will not be enough, probably, to respond to the situation. But what we almost have in in good numbers is the tarpaulins.
Nhlabati explained that while the organization has prepared for the strong winds, but it still lacks crucial response items like family tents, food and proper response vehicles which will be able to withstand all types of terrains. For Eswatini TV News, Hlengiwe Ndlovu with Muzim Konda in Babane.
Now coming on from the High Court of Eswatini today, Ricardo de Souza denies that His Majesty's Correctional Services has medical facilities to take care of ill inmates with underlying conditions during these times of the coronavirus pandemic. Ricardo told the court that it was common knowledge that the trained staff and proper ventilators are at the Lubombo Referral Hospital, the Luke Commission and Mavuso Trade Center. Ricardo wants the court to release him on bail in a matter where he is accused of murdering Den Duma and Temsile Lukele, and one of his reasons is that he has an underlying medical condition. Temigose Mavimbela has more on that story.
Ricardo de Souza, who is an accused in the murder of Den Duma, who was popularly known as Sipambanana, and Temsile Lukele, who was the mother of his daughter, has replied to the Crown in his bail application. In his responding papers, Ricardo alleged that His Majesty's Correctional Services health facilities do not have the capacity to take care of ill inmates who have underlying medical conditions during these trying times of the coronavirus pandemic. Ricardo claimed to have an underlying medical condition which could lead to his demise if he would contract the virus, yet he was presumed innocent until proven guilty by law. Ricardo emphasized that he never committed the offense as he was at his maternal home sleeping on the night of the burning of Duma and Tembisile's shack. He denied going to Asian filling station at Eswatini to buy fuel on the night of the murder. Ricardo also denied drinking alcohol with his friends on the night in question. He claimed to have gone to bed at around 9 p.m. and left the house at 8 a.m. when he was going to work. Ricardo alleged that he had no reason to murder Tembisile and Duma. He submitted that he had already taken his minor child from Tembisile and was staying with his mother at Dalridge East. Ricardo claimed that if granted bail, he would relocate from Dalridge East to Moneni, where his father stayed, or Sitegi, where there are other relatives. Ricardo claimed that there was no evidence that if granted bail, he would be a danger to the public. He also claimed that there was no evidence that he would evade trial, interfere with state witnesses, or jeopardize the proper functioning of the criminal justice system if granted bail. In the matter, Ricardo is represented by Tulani and Sibanze, and representing the Crown is Lomkosi Dlamini. For Eswatini TV News, Temgosi Mavimbela, High Court.
The High Court has postponed the civil matter between the late Kino Simba's children and their stepmother, in which they are fighting over household items taken from the deceased's house at Manzana. Kinos was a businessman who owned Likomba Lemaswati. Now the court has ordered that the parties should consult and return to it next week with a solution.
Today was trial day 1 of the Zwagele Simba, Banele Simba and Nduduzo Simba matter, where they have taken legal action against their stepmother, Kainsile Dlamini. The former trio are sons to the late Kino Simba, who owned Likomba Lemaswati. The matter before court, the three applicants want the court to direct Kainsile to immediately return to them all household items taken from a house they stayed in with the deceased at Manzana, among other prayers. Arguing before court through their lawyer Noncedo Ndlangamandla, the trio submitted that its bone of contention is the manner in which Kainsile took the items from the house. The trio submitted that there was no court order allowing the respondent to take the items. The applicants argued that the master's office ought to have been consulted before anything. In terms of the lease agreement for the rented house at Manzana lapsing month end, the three brothers submitted that they could renew the lease or find an alternative place to stay. In response, Khanyisile, through her lawyer Sabela Dlamini, submitted to the court that the rented flat at Manzana was her marital home. She submitted that the flat would accrue a lot of debt, which she would have to settle as the surviving spouse. The court asked what prejudice would Khanyisile suffer if she would leave the items to continue to be used by the applicants, as they now claimed to be worse off. Speaking on behalf of his client, Sabela submitted that the applicants could have access to the household items at their parental home where they are kept. The court then asked whether the matter should not have been dealt with by the Office of the Master of the High Court before reaching the High Court. It then ruled that the matter should be postponed to next Tuesday for consultation on a suitable solution. The matter is before Judge Cyril Mapanga. For Eswatini TV News, Temgosi Mavimbela, High Court.
Welcome back, and now we're looking at news making headlines in sports. The Vice President of the Taekwondo Association, Sizwe Mabuza, says the year-long suspension of the Taekwondo games and activities because of the COVID-19 has compromised the level of the sport's competitiveness.
Taekwondo has been suspended for nearly a year after the coronavirus outbreak, which forced sporting events to be suspended in March 2020. Karatekas, though, continued with their training, holding to the hopes that they will soon be back competing again. Almost a year later, they're still not able to go back to compete, which is now even worrying the association. As the vice president of the association, Sizwe Mabuza, says they are worried that the level of the sport has declined.
In terms of the standard of the sport in the country, because the past 2-3 years were quickly gaining good momentum.
Mabuza says they are in trouble as they are not able to go back to train in almost a year or host their games. This, he believes, will now compromise the level of the sport in the country. He says in the past 3 years they were really gaining the momentum they needed to promote the sport, but since the outbreak they are not able to train together and host tournaments, and they do not know where and if they are training more, especially because it is difficult to train on your own. They are really worried about the standard of the game. Mabuza says they had many international events lined up, which they ended up not attending, which will now delay the progress of their juniors as they are preparing them for the 2028 World Olympics Games. Reporting for Eswatini TV Sports News, I am Patizo Msivi, Mbabane.
Well, Eswatini, that brings us to the end of our news bulletin at 8 here at Eswatini TV. Before we go, here's a quick recap of news making headlines tonight. The Ministry of Health is engaging different companies to increase their oxygen supply to Eswatini. Over 70 students from Eswatini have left the kingdom for Botswana in a flight chartered by government. And the Eswatini Electricity Company has put in place an emergency preparedness plan for places that might be affected by strong winds in the upcoming weekend. Well, Eswatini, that brings us to the end of our news bulletin at 8 here at Eswatini TV. Thank you so much for staying with us. A detailed weather report from the Weather Center shall follow from us and the rest of the transmission team at Eswatini TV. For now, it's good night and God bless.
Everywhere you go, MTN.